It was a hot summer afternoon, and the city roads shimmered under the blazing sun. Cars moved slowly, and people hurried to find shade wherever they could. On the edge of a quiet street, a shiny black luxury car rolled smoothly. Its windows slightly tinted. Inside sat Mr. Anderson, a man known for his sharp suits, calm face, and powerful company that everyone admired. He was a CEO, one of those men who always seemed to have everything under control. Mr. Anderson was on his way to an important business meeting. He had a big deal waiting for him downtown, and time was ticking fast. His phone buzzed with messages and calls, but he ignored them for the moment. He just wanted to reach the meeting on time and close another successful deal. He believed every minute of his day had value, and he hated wasting even 1 second. As he drove through the quiet road, the car suddenly made a strange sound, a soft knock followed by a quick jerk. Mr. Anderson frowned, thinking it might be just a small glitch, but within seconds, the car slowed down and stopped completely. He tried starting the engine again, but it made a tired whirring noise. Then silence. The car refused to move. A wave of frustration hit him. He looked at his watch. He was already late. The heat outside was unbearable, and the road seemed empty. He pressed the start button again, but nothing happened. He sighed heavily and muttered under his breath, blaming his luck and the car company. For a man who solved million-dollar problems daily, a broken car felt like an insult. He stepped out of the car, the hot air hitting his face instantly. The street was quiet except for the faint buzzing of cicadas and the sound of a distant ice cream truck. Sweat began to form on his forehead as he opened the car's hood and stared at the engine. He had no idea what he was looking at. To him, it was just a mess of wires, metal, and smoke. Mr. Anderson took out his phone to call for roadside assistance, but the signal was weak. He walked a few steps in different directions, holding the phone up, trying to catch even one bar of signal. Nothing worked. The frustration in his chest grew heavier. He looked around again, hoping someone would pass by. A mechanic, a local driver, anyone, but the road stayed empty. For the first time in a long while, he felt helpless. The heat, the silence, the ticking clock, all of it made him restless. He leaned against his car, loosening his tie, and thought about how strange it was that even with all his success, a small thing like a broken engine could stop him completely. Just then, a faint voice broke the silence. It was soft, hesitant, but clear enough to hear. Mr. Anderson turned his head and saw a small figure walking toward him. It was a little girl, maybe 10 years old. Her clothes were worn and a bit dusty. Her shoes looked old and her hair was tied back loosely. She carried a small bag slung across her shoulder. She walked slowly, her eyes curious yet gentle. When she got closer, she stopped a few steps away from him and looked at the open car hood. Mr. Anderson noticed how tiny her hands were. He was confused. Why was a little girl out here alone in this heat? The girl spoke again, her voice polite but shy. "Sir, is your car broken?" Mr. Anderson gave a short nod, wiping sweat from his forehead. He was too tired to talk much. The girl took another step closer, looking at the engine carefully. Then she said something that surprised him completely. "I don't have money, sir, but can I fix your engine?" For a moment, Mr. Anderson thought he misheard her. He blinked and looked at her again. She didn't look like someone who could fix anything, let alone a luxury car. He even wondered if it was some kind of joke. But the girl's expression was serious. She wasn't laughing, she stood quietly, waiting for his answer. The CEO felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, especially not a child from the streets. He crossed his arms and asked, "You? Fix my car? How would you know how to do that?" The girl smiled slightly and pointed at the engine. "My father used to fix cars, sir. He taught me a little before he passed away. Sometimes I help people in our neighborhood when their bikes or machines stop working." There was silence for a moment. The air seemed to pause between them. Mr. Anderson didn't know what to say. Something in her voice sounded honest, innocent, and determined. He could see the dirt on her hands and the small scratches that spoke of hard work. He wanted to say no, to tell her to go home where it was safe. But something stopped him. Maybe it was her eyes. They didn't show fear or weakness, only quiet confidence. Maybe it was the strange feeling inside his chest, a whisper that told him to listen. As the sun burned brighter above them and the heat waves danced on the road, the little girl waited patiently. Her tiny figure stood beside the big, shiny car, a strange but powerful image of courage and hope. Mr. Anderson finally sighed and nodded. He didn't know why, but he felt this moment was about to change more than just his car, and that's how a broken engine on a hot afternoon became the beginning of a story neither of them would ever forget. The little girl stood quietly under the burning afternoon sun. Her shadow stretched long beside the broken car, and her small figure looked fragile against the wide, empty road. Yet there was something brave in her eyes, something far bigger than her tiny body could show. Mr. Anderson stared at her for a moment, still trying to understand why a child like her had come forward to offer help. Her skin glistened slightly from the heat, and her hands were rough, marked with the signs of someone used to hard work. She clutched the strap of her small torn bag tightly, perhaps a little nervous, but she didn't back away. Her voice was soft but steady when she repeated, "Sir, I can help. I've fixed engines before." The CEO blinked in disbelief. He had spent his entire life surrounded by experts, engineers, executives, and advisors, people who wore suits like him and spoke in big words, yet here in the middle of nowhere, a barefoot little girl was offering to fix his luxury car. It was almost absurd, but somehow, it didn't feel like a joke. "Where are your parents?" he asked, half curious, half concerned. The girl lowered her eyes for a moment before answering. "My mother is at home, taking care of my baby brother. My father." She paused briefly. "He used to fix cars, but he's not here anymore." Her words carried a quiet ache that even the wind seemed to respect. Mr. Anderson felt a strange tug in his chest, a feeling he couldn't explain. He wanted to tell her to go home, that this was not her job, that she shouldn't be out in the heat helping strangers. But before he could speak, she stepped closer to the car, peeking into the open hood like she had seen it 100 times before. "Sir, can you please turn the key once?" she asked politely. Her voice had that same tone mechanics used when diagnosing a problem. Mr. Anderson raised an eyebrow but obeyed. He sat inside and pressed the start button. The car made a soft clicking noise, then went silent again. The girl nodded thoughtfully, like a little scientist studying her experiment. She looked around, then took a piece of cloth from her small bag. It looked like an old handkerchief, probably once white but now faded with grease and dust. Standing on her toes, she reached into the engine carefully, moving wires and feeling around the metal parts with confidence. Mr. Anderson watched in silence, his arms crossed but his curiosity growing stronger by the second. There was no fear in her movements, only focus. It was like she could hear the machine whispering its secret to her. The scene looked unreal, a rich man's car being repaired by a poor little girl on a deserted road. Minutes passed quietly, except for the occasional clang of metal and the sound of her gentle humming as she worked. Finally, she stepped back, wiping her forehead with her sleeve. "Try again, sir," she said. Smiling faintly, Mr. Anderson hesitated, part of him still doubting. But he did as she asked when he turned the key. The car came alive with a deep, powerful rumble. The engine purred smoothly. Just like before, for a second, he couldn't believe it. He stared at the dashboard, then at the little girl who stood there grinning proudly. "You fixed it," he whispered. Half in shock, she nodded, her eyes bright with joy. "It was just a loose connector, sir. It happens when the wire shakes too much on bumpy roads," she explained simply, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Mr. Anderson stepped out of the car, completely astonished. He had spent thousands of dollars on engineers who struggled with smaller problems. And yet here stood a little girl who solved it in 10 minutes with nothing but her hands and a piece of cloth. "How did you know all that?" he asked softly. The girl smiled again, but this time her eyes grew distant. "My father taught me before he passed away. He said machines talk if you listen carefully. I help people sometimes when their bikes stop or when old engines die," she said. Her words carried pride, not pity. For a moment, the CEO didn't know what to say. He looked at her, barefoot, poor, dusty, but standing tall like someone filled with quiet dignity. She wasn't asking for anything, not money, not praise. She had helped him simply because she could. Mr. Anderson felt something shift inside him, something deep and unfamiliar. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, but before he could offer her anything, the girl shook her head quickly. "No, sir, please, I didn't help for money. I just wanted to do what I can," she said softly. He froze, her words echoing in his mind. He had spent his life in a world where everything had a price, but here was a little girl reminding him that kindness didn't need one. The wind blew gently across the road, and the golden sunlight glimmered on the car's surface once more. The engine was fixed. But something far more important had been repaired that day. The CEO's heart. He didn't realize it yet, but this small encounter would stay with him forever. As the girl began to walk away, her small figure fading slowly down the street, Mr. Anderson stood there watching silently. The sound of his engine still humming behind him, but his thoughts were louder. He knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. For a long moment, Mr. Anderson stood in silence, watching the little girl wipe her hands and smile proudly at the car she had just brought back to life. The sound of the engine filled the air, steady and strong, but his mind was anything but steady. He couldn't decide whether to feel amazed, confused, or ashamed. He looked at her small hands, hands that had just done what trained mechanics sometimes failed to do. Her fingers were rough, her nails dark from grease, but those were the hands of someone capable, brave and full of quiet skill. It didn't make sense to him. A little girl fixing a luxury car? It sounded impossible, and yet it had just happened before his very eyes. Who taught you this? He finally asked, still trying to make sense of what he'd seen. The girl looked up shyly and replied, "My father, sir. He used to fix cars before he died. I just watched him every day. I learned by looking, by trying." Her voice was calm, like she had said it many times before. There was something about the way she spoke, simple, honest, without self-pity, that caught his heart off guard. He had heard many stories of struggle in his business world, but those stories were often told in boardrooms decorated with numbers and reports, not in the middle of a dusty road by a barefoot child. Mr. Anderson was a man used to being in control. He ran a company where hundreds of employees followed his commands. He owned properties, cars, and lived in luxury. Yet in that moment, standing before this small girl who had helped him without asking for anything, he felt strangely small himself. He asked her name, and she smiled shyly. "My name is Amara," she said softly. "It means grace." Her name fit her perfectly, he thought. She had walked into his life like a quiet miracle, fixing not just his car but something deeper he hadn't realized was broken. "Amara," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the sound of it. "Do you often help people like this?" She nodded, brushing a bit of dirt from her cheek. "Sometimes, sir, when someone's bike or cart stops. I try to help. It makes me happy to fix things. It makes me feel like my father is still here," she said. Her words were gentle, but they carried the weight of loss. Mr. Anderson's chest tightened. He wanted to say something comforting, but the words didn't come. Instead, he just watched her, his mind filled with thoughts he hadn't had in years. He wondered how long she had been living like this, helping others without expecting anything in return. He thought of his own daughter, sitting in her private school, surrounded by comfort and privilege. The difference between the two children felt like a sharp line drawn by fate. He cleared his throat and said, "You did a great job, Amara. You really did." The girl smiled again, a wide, genuine smile that made her eyes sparkle. "Thank you, sir. I'm just glad I could help," she said softly. She turned to leave, but something inside him stopped her. "Wait," he said quickly, reaching into his pocket. He took out a few notes and held them toward her. "Take this, for your help." But Amara shook her head immediately. "No, sir, please, I didn't do it for money. I just wanted to help," she said again. Her refusal was polite but firm, and it surprised him even more than her skill had. In his world, people did everything for gain, money, promotion, attention, but this child, who clearly needed help herself, was refusing it. Her words echoed in his mind. "I didn't do it for money." It was such a simple sentence, yet it felt like a lesson written just for him. He slowly put the money back in his pocket, watching her with new eyes. He realized there was something special about this girl, something pure, something untouched by greed or selfishness. She reminded him of a time long ago, before success had hardened his heart. Before life became a race for profit and power, the road was quiet again, the sun dipping lower in the sky, casting a soft golden light around them. Amara stood with her little bag on her shoulder, her smile still gentle. "Sir, I should go. My mother will worry," she said, turning slightly toward the path that led into a small neighborhood nearby. "Mr. Anderson nodded slowly, still lost in thought. "All right, Amara. But remember this, you did something amazing today," he said. She looked at him with grateful eyes and replied, "Thank you, sir. But anyone can do amazing things if they just try." Then she waved and began walking away, her small figure growing smaller with every step. He watched until she disappeared from sight. His car was fixed, but his heart was still restless. The little girl had left something behind, a question, a spark, a feeling he couldn't explain. As he sat back in his car, he didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he stared through the windshield. Lost in deep thought for the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, not ambition, not pride, but something softer, something that felt like humility. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a change he would never forget. The CEO who once believed he had seen everything had just met a little girl who would remind him what true value really means. Mr. Anderson sat behind the steering wheel for a few seconds, still lost in disbelief. The sound of the engine running smoothly felt almost unreal. Only minutes ago it had been dead silent, and now it purred like a content cat under the hood. He stepped out again, watching the faint smoke disappear into the warm afternoon air. The little girl, Amara, stood beside the car, looking proud but shy, wiping her oily hands on her faded dress. He couldn't help but smile slightly, something he hadn't done genuinely in a long time. The world he lived in rarely gave him moments like this. Moments that made him forget his phone, his meetings, and his strict schedule. Amara's presence had slowed time, making everything feel simple again. "Show me what you did," he asked curiously. Amara nodded and carefully lifted the hood again. The metal shimmered faintly under the sunlight. She pointed to a small section near the corner of the engine. "See this, sir? The connector here was loose, that's why your car wouldn't start," she explained confidently. Her voice carried a mix of innocence and intelligence that surprised him. She reached inside and gently tapped the part she had fixed. "It wasn't broken, sir, just tired," she added with a small laugh. Her words made him chuckle softly. It was such a childlike way to describe an engine, calling it tired instead of broken. But somehow, it made perfect sense. He crouched beside her, still amazed at how natural she looked while talking about machines. Most adults he knew didn't even know what went on under a car's hood. Yet this 10-year-old girl was explaining it as if she had spent her whole life studying it. "You learned all this from your father?" he asked. Amara nodded proudly. "Yes, sir. I used to sit beside him when he worked. He said every machine has a heart, and if you listen closely, it tells you what it needs," she said. Her words touched something deep inside him. They weren't just about machines, they were about people too. He noticed her eyes light up as she spoke about her father, and for a moment her face looked both joyful and sad. "Do you miss him?" he asked gently. She nodded, her smile fading just a little. "Every day, sir, but when I fix something, I feel like he's with me," she said softly. Mr. Anderson felt a lump in his throat. The simplicity of her words held more meaning than all the speeches he had ever heard in his company boardrooms. He realized this girl had learned life's hardest lessons far too early, yet she carried them with grace instead of bitterness. Amara looked at the car once more, then closed the hood carefully. "Now it should be fine, sir," she said, "but don't drive too fast. Sometimes even strong things need rest." Her advice made him smile again. It was strange, he was a man who gave orders to hundreds of people, but right now, he found himself listening carefully to every word of a little girl. The CEO glanced down at her bag, curious. "What do you keep in there?" he asked. She opened it shyly. Inside were a few small tools, an old wrench, a tiny screwdriver, and a folded rag. "Just things I use to fix things for people," she said. "Sometimes they give me coins, sometimes food. But I like it better when they just smile." Her words were simple, but they felt heavier than gold. Mr. Anderson had built a life chasing success and wealth. Yet this little girl found joy in something as pure as making someone smile. It humbled him deeply as the sun began to dip lower. The warm light softened around them, turning everything golden. A small breeze passed through, carrying the faint smell of oil and dust. The CEO realized that something had shifted inside him. The frustration he'd felt earlier had disappeared, replaced by quiet admiration and gratitude. He looked at Amara again, her small frame standing beside his big car, and he felt a sense of respect he couldn't explain. "Amara," he said quietly, "you didn't just fix my car. You reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago." The girl tilted her head, a little confused. "What's that, sir?" He smiled softly. "That kindness doesn't need money, and skill doesn't need age," he said. Amara's eyes widened and she smiled, her face lighting up with joy. "My father used to say the same thing," she said happily. "He said everyone can make a difference, even if they don't have much." For a moment, the world felt completely still. The sound of the working engine, the soft wind, and the golden light created a scene that would stay in Mr. Anderson's memory forever. He realized that this moment was worth more than any business deal or success he had ever achieved. He reached into his car and took out a small bottle of water, handing it to her. "Here, Amara, please drink something. You've worked hard." She accepted it gratefully and took a sip. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly as she stood there, sipping water with her innocent smile. Mr. Anderson knew this wasn't just a random encounter. It felt like destiny had stopped his car that day, not because of a fault, but to remind him of something much greater: humanity, humility, and the quiet beauty of helping without expecting anything in return. He didn't say it out loud, but deep down he knew that this little girl had repaired more than just his car. She had repaired a small, forgotten part of his soul. Mr. Anderson couldn't take his eyes off the little girl. Her confidence, her knowledge, and her kindness kept replaying in his mind like a scene from a dream. He had met many smart people in his life, but never someone who carried wisdom with such innocence. He wanted to know more about her, about where she came from, about how a child like her learned to fix what others couldn't. "Amara," he said gently, "do you fix cars every day?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Not every day, sir. Sometimes people don't want my help because I'm small, or they think I don't know anything," she said softly. Her voice carried no anger, only quiet acceptance. "But when they let me try, I usually can fix something, Mr." Anderson felt his heart grow heavy. He realized how unfair the world could be. A little girl with talent and courage was being ignored, while people with plenty of chances often did nothing. "What about school?" he asked carefully, hoping she would say she still studied. Amara looked down at her dusty shoes. "I stopped going, sir," she said quietly. "After my father died, we couldn't afford the fees anymore. My mother works at the market, but it's not enough. I wanted to help her, so I started fixing things. Sometimes I earn a few coins. Sometimes people just thank me, and that's fine too." Her words hit him harder than he expected. It was like hearing a truth he had forgotten existed, the kind of truth hidden behind luxury walls and busy schedules. This child wasn't just surviving. She was fighting life every single day with courage and grace. He remembered how angry he had been just half an hour ago when his car broke down. He thought about how easily he lost his patience over small inconveniences. While this little girl faced real struggles daily and still smiled through them, it made him feel small, ashamed even. "Does your mother know you help people like this?" he asked softly. Amara nodded. "Yes, sir. She worries sometimes, but she says I have my father's hands. He used to fix engines and bicycles. He was a good man. Everyone in the neighborhood came to him when they had trouble," she said. Her eyes glowed as she spoke, but there was sadness hidden behind that glow. Mr. Anderson listened silently, his heart tightening with every word. "And what happened to him?" he asked carefully. Amara's smile faded a little. Her voice grew lower. "He got sick, sir. We didn't have money for a hospital. He told me not to cry. He said one day I'd help people the way he did. Even if the world forgets his name," she said slowly. Her eyes shimmered in the golden light, but no tears fell. She was too strong for that. The air around them grew still, and for a moment, even the city's distant sounds faded. Mr. Anderson felt something inside him crack. He had heard many stories of hardship in his life, but this one felt different. Maybe because it came from a child's mouth, or maybe because it showed him how small his problems really were. He thought about all the money he spent daily, on meetings, cars, dinners, and things that never truly made him happy. And here stood a little girl who found joy in fixing broken things. Without asking for anything in return, he wanted to say something comforting, but his words got lost in his throat. Instead, he just stood there, feeling more moved than he had in years. He realized that life had stopped his car for a reason, not to delay him, but to teach him something he desperately needed to remember. "Amara," he said after a pause, "your father must have been a great man." She smiled softly. "He was, sir. He used to say that helping others makes the heart stronger," she replied. Her words sank deep into his soul. The CEO looked at her again, her small frame standing proud despite her torn clothes, her spirit shining brighter than the sun above them. She didn't have money, she didn't have comfort, but she had something far more valuable: heart. He finally spoke, his voice lower, almost emotional. "You know, Amara, people like your father are the real teachers in this world. They leave lessons that even time can't erase, she nodded, her eyes full of quiet wisdom. At that moment, Mr. Anderson realized he wasn't just talking to a child. He was standing in front of strength itself, disguised as a little girl with dirty hands and a pure heart. He looked around the empty road and felt something shift inside him again. This wasn't an ordinary meeting, this was fate. A broken engine had led him to a story that would change his view of the world forever. Amara smiled one last time, her eyes reflecting both sadness and hope. "Sir," she said softly, "I'm happy I could help you. My father always said when you help someone, you fix two things, their problem and your heart." Her words struck him deeply. He felt the truth in them like a spark that lit up his soul. He took a deep breath, realizing this encounter wasn't over. In fact, it was just the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could imagine. As the sunlight faded and the sky began to turn orange, Mr. Anderson looked at the little girl and knew that her story wasn't just going to stay on this lonely road. It was going to stay in his heart forever. Dury Anderson sat quietly behind the wheel, but his thoughts were far from quiet. The engine now purred perfectly, yet he couldn't bring himself to drive away. His hands rested on the steering wheel, but his eyes were fixed on the small figure walking down the road, the girl who had just changed something inside him without even realizing it. He had met hundreds of people in his lifetime, powerful businessmen, wealthy investors, and famous leaders, but no one had ever made him feel the way Amara did. There was something about her calm strength, her kindness, and her quiet dignity that reached a part of his heart he had long forgotten existed. He remembered how angry he had been when his car broke down earlier, how he had cursed his luck and blamed everything but himself. And now, as he watched that little girl walking away, he felt almost ashamed. The universe hadn't punished him by stopping his car. It had sent him a message, a lesson wrapped in the shape of a small, barefoot angel. He started the car slowly, driving forward until he reached her. The sound of the tires on the dusty road caught her attention. She turned, her eyes wide but kind as always. "Sir?" she asked softly. Mr. Anderson rolled down the window. "Amara," he said gently, "can I drop you somewhere?" She smiled and shook her head. "It's okay, sir, I live nearby." "You've already given me more than enough," she said politely. He frowned slightly. "But I haven't given you anything," he replied. Amara laughed softly, the kind of laugh that was light yet full of meaning. "You listened, sir. That's something most people don't do," she said, and her words hit him like a whisper of truth. He stepped out of the car again, unable to let her just walk away.
"Amara," he said seriously, "do you want to study again?"
"To go back to school?" The question made her eyes widen. She hesitated before answering. "Of course, sir, I want to learn. I love studying, but..." She looked down at her feet. "We can't afford it." There was something in her voice, a quiet pain mixed with hope, that stirred something powerful inside him. He took a deep breath and said, "What if I told you I could help you go back? Would you want that?" The girl stared at him, unsure if she had heard him right. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to believe him but was afraid to hope too much. "You'd do that, sir?" she whispered. Anderson nodded slowly. "Yes, Amara, I would," he said. "You have a gift, and gifts like yours should never be wasted. Your father must be very proud of you, and I think he'd want you to keep learning, to keep growing." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt heavy but warm. Her eyes filled with tears, she tried to blink away. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled gently. "By studying hard." "That's how," he replied. Amara nodded quickly, wiping her tears with her sleeve. "I promise, sir. I won't waste the chance," she said. Her voice carried strength again, stronger than before. He smiled, feeling something unfamiliar. Peace. The kind of peace money could never buy. He realized how strange life was, how it sometimes took a broken moment to fix a broken heart. He asked her to call her mother, and together they drove to the small neighborhood she lived in. The streets grew narrower and the houses were old but full of life. Children played with makeshift toys and women talked outside, trying to forget their daily struggles for a few minutes. Amara's mother came out of a small, one-room house when she saw the car. Her face was tired but kind. She looked worried until she saw Amara smiling beside the man. Amara ran to her and hugged her tightly. "Mama, he's the man whose car broke down. I fixed it and he wants to help me go back to school," she said excitedly. The mother's eyes widened and she looked at Mr. Anderson with disbelief and gratitude mixed together. "Sir, you don't have to do that. We don't want to trouble you," she said softly. He shook his head. "It's not trouble, ma'am. Your daughter reminded me of something important today. She deserves a future." Tears welled up in the mother's eyes as she held Amara close. Mr. Anderson stood there quietly, realizing that he hadn't just offered help. He had found meaning. As he left their home, the sky above was painted in orange and pink. The world looked softer somehow, lighter. The sound of the car engine no longer felt mechanical. It felt alive. Just like his heart, he smiled to himself, whispering, "Sometimes, life breaks us in the right places just to fix us again." He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He would never forget that little girl who fixed more than just his car that day. That evening, as the city lights began to glow, Mr. Anderson realized that true wealth wasn't in his bank account or his company. It was in small acts of kindness, in the courage of a child, and in the quiet moments that remind us we're still human. The next morning, Mr. Anderson woke up earlier than usual. The world outside was quiet, the sky painted in shades of pale gold, but his mind was already full of thoughts about the little girl named Amara. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Her courage, her intelligence, her pure heart. It had been years since something touched him that deeply. As he sat in his grand kitchen sipping coffee, the silence around him felt heavier than ever. Everything he owned, his house, his cars, his success, suddenly felt smaller, meaningless even. Compared to the strength he saw in that child's eyes, he kept remembering her words. "Anyone can fix something if they just try." That line echoed inside his heart like a soft melody. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with business or power. Later that day, he called his assistant and asked her to find out which schools were near Amara's neighborhood. The assistant was confused, thinking it was a business project, but he simply said, "Just do it, it's important." His voice carried a calmness it hadn't held in years. When he arrived at the small area where Amara lived, children were running barefoot on the dusty road and laughter filled the air. It was a place full of struggle but also full of life. Amara spotted him from afar and ran toward him with excitement. "Sir, you came back," she said. Her smile was bright enough to make the whole street feel warmer. Her mother stepped out from their little house again, this time less nervous. "Good afternoon, sir," she said politely. He nodded and smiled. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I was thinking about what we talked about yesterday," he began. "I'd like to help Amara go back to school." Amara's mother covered her mouth in shock. "Sir, that's too much. We can't accept," she started. But he gently interrupted. "Please, don't think of it as charity. Think of it as gratitude. Your daughter helped me when I needed it most, and I want to return that kindness." Amara looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and joy. "Really, sir? You'll help me study again?" she asked, her small hands clenched together in hope. Mr. Anderson nodded with a warm smile. "Yes, Amara, I will. You deserve every chance to learn and grow." The mother's eyes filled with tears as she whispered a prayer under her breath. "God bless you, sir," she said softly. Amara hugged her mother tightly, unable to hide her happiness. Mr. Anderson spent the next few hours talking with a nearby school principal, explaining the situation. The principal listened carefully and agreed to admit Amara with full support. Mr. Anderson quietly paid for her tuition, uniforms, and supplies, but he didn't want anyone to make a big deal out of it. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because his heart finally understood what true generosity meant. When he returned to their home with the news, Amara could hardly believe it. "I can go to school again?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Yes, starting Monday," he said kindly. Her eyes sparkled like sunlight on water. She jumped with joy and ran to show her mother the new notebooks he brought for her. For the first time in years, Mr. Anderson laughed freely, a genuine laugh that came from deep within. It felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from his soul. Before he left, Amara ran up to him again, holding a small piece of folded paper. "Sir, wait," she said. "I made this for you." He unfolded it carefully. Inside was a simple drawing of a car and two people, one tall man in a suit and one small girl with a ponytail. Standing beside it, on top she had written in shaky handwriting, "Thank you for believing in me." His throat tightened as he looked at the paper. It wasn't just a drawing, it was a message, a reminder that sometimes the smallest hearts carry the biggest lessons. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Amara," he said softly, You have no idea how much you've changed me. She tilted her head, smiling. Maybe I fixed something in you too. Sir, she said innocently. Her words hit him like a wave. He smiled, blinking back tears he didn't expect. Yes, you did, he whispered as he drove back home that evening. The city lights blurred softly outside his window, but everything looked different now. The world didn't feel as cold as it used to. Every honking car, every busy street, every sound of laughter reminded him that life was more than success. It was about connection, compassion, and giving back. He realized he didn't just make a promise to help Amara. He had made a promise to himself to live differently, to care more, to look beyond the numbers and see people again. The CEO who once measured his worth in profits had finally learned that real value could only be measured by the good he did for others. And as he looked up at the night sky, he smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you, little mechanic, for fixing more than just my engine."